So, Nate, does Dune 2 leave you with sand in your pants?
Watch the review and find out, Joey.
Look at me, it's Timmy T. About to hit him with the ZTST. Let's do a problem.
Dune Part 2 is directed by Denis Villeneuve and stars Timothée Chalamet, Zendaya, Rebecca Ferguson, Josh Brolin, Austin Butler, Florence Pugh, and a ton of other talented actors. And this is the second part to Denis Villeneuve's Dune trilogy.
Yeah. Hopefully a trilogy. Hopefully. I'm going to come right out of the gates. I think this one was better than the first one. I'm going to be honest.
For a while, Dune was one of those books that people didn't think was adaptable. And so here comes Denis Villeneuve a couple of years back with the first part of Dune. And for the first time, a lot of people were actually like, oh, wow, Dune could actually be a movie.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, the first movie was so faithful to the book. I started reading the books after I watched the first Dune. And man, it's incredibly faithful. And that continues in Part 2. Everything that Dune Part 1 had set up, it pays off in every way. It's an upgrade of a movie. Mm-hmm. In almost every single respect. And that's the highest honor that you can give a sequel, is that it succeeds the original.
Me, personally, I came in with no prior knowledge of Dune. I had seen the first Dune with a type of movie that is not only a book adaptation, but you have to cover so much content. There's going to be a lot of talking. But where they do a good job with these adaptations of the book is they make everybody talking count.
So like I mentioned, I've read the first 3 Dune books. I read Dune, I read Dune Messiah, and I've read Children of Dune. Man, just the cast for this movie is the spitting image of the characters from the books, and that's a hard thing to do. My gauge for how good a book adaptation is, could I watch this instead of the book and still get the bones of the story and still understand everything? Mm-hmm. Absolutely, you could do that with Dune Part 1 and 2. You watch both of those back to back, you know the story of Dune.
Me and Nate were talking about the dynamics of not only the movie, but like just the story in general.
Yes.
And he verified that I picked up on a lot of the themes that were on the book. And like I said, I went into the movies with no prior knowledge of the book. One of the things that stands out to me about this series the most is religious iconography. My first semester of college, I went to a religious school. I've always had an interest in religion. For me, what Dune does is it takes the stuff that I wish was explored in like Star Wars with the Jedi and like their code and their like system of honor and like how the Jedi really are a religion if you think about it. But it takes all those aspects that I wish were explored in other types of sci-fi worlds, and it's like as if it was the only focus in this world. They achieve imagery in this movie that is not only emotionally moving, but it resonates with you in such like a primal way.
That's a big thing about this movie is, and I mean, it was something in the first movie. It was incredible to look at. Mm-hmm. One common complaint people had with the first movie was, it's just Denis Villeneuve cinematography reel. You know, like you're just looking at pretty things, and to a lot of people, there wasn't much.
Yeah.
To someone like me who had read the book, oh God, there's so much.
Yeah.
In the first movie, but in this movie, you have so much to look at. It can be kind of overwhelming, but like in a good way.
It's like you're getting too much food, but you're excited because you're going to have leftovers.
I didn't personally believe this, but a lot of people believe that the first movie was very slow and built to nothing. And I can totally see that. Yeah. It's a very slow-paced movie. And when this movie started, yes, it was very slow. It has a extremely slow first act.
Yes.
I was engrossed because, I mean, I just love the story of Dune. I think it's a quintessential sci-fi story.
My uncle, on the other hand,
fell right asleep.
My uncle fell asleep.
But after that point, though, he was not asleep.
He was locked in. Because, like, once this movie gets rolling...
Once it gets going, it gets going.
The scale of the movie feels like it just keeps on increasing. It was literally the reverse of the first movie, because this movie just kind of ended. Not in a bad way, but, like, they just hit another...
a very powerful note.
Yeah, a very powerful, sudden, and sharp note with the great Hans Zimmer score.
Yes. And once again, he is doing his thing.
Yeah, Hans, bro.
His thing.
I don't know.
Horns are blaring the whole movie.
I don't understand this man's brain. I don't understand this man's brain.
It is about as Hans Zimmer a score as you can get. Now, I did want to talk individually about each of the characters, though, because everybody has a time to shine.
Right off the bat, Austin Butler. He was the first person I walked away with that blew me away.
I would say, other than Timothée Chalamet, I mean, he's the protagonist, but Austin Butler is sort of like the MVP of the movie.
Dude, Austin Butler kind of stole the show.
He has a presence in this movie.
He ate up that character.
Yes.
There was something about that character I feel that he just resonated with in a weird way, and I think he just knew what that guy was supposed to be.
Yeah, Fade Routha in the book is a foil to Paul in many ways, and you get that in this.
Yeah.
Fantastically performed by Austin Butler.
You know, nowadays it's very easy to go a Heath Ledger Joker route.
Yeah.
And just make him off the walls
Comically
100% of the time. But he wasn't like that.
He was very calculated.
He was very calculated
Yes.
and methodical. And I think like the greatest threat about his character is that his character understands that he's crazy.
Yes.
And he uses that. And that's something that a lot of characters can't grasp. Because when you go like the psychopathic character route, people just go straight psychotic. And that's not who he is. He was such an interesting villain.
I've always maintained like both Timothée Chalamet and Austin Butler are great actors of this generation, and like this movie, just having the two of them bounce off of each other especially at the end was crazy.
God. Yeah. They really made the ending.
You have Zendaya who's throwing her heart into this movie. She is very, very later. Her performance is a lot more subtle than say Austin Butler's and Timothée Chalamet's, but it's great. She has a really good range of emotions in this movie that is shown just in like her eyes, and that goes for most of the actors in this movie. They're really good at using no dialogue to show how they feel, and no dialogue to like move the story forward.
Yeah,
and another like key character was Lady Jessica. Rebecca Ferguson's character was just. She wasn't in the movie as much as the first, but like whenever she was there.
She was causing some shit, bro. She was there. She was making things happen when she was there.
And Lady Jessica is one of my favorite characters from the book, just because of how much of a
she moves mountains.
Deviant she is.
Yeah.
That's something I'm saying about every actor in this movie, and that's they have presence.
Yeah.
That's such an important thing, especially for a Dune movie where literally every character in Dune is so important. I want to say to people that are going into this movie, this is a very different sci-fi movie than I think a lot of the general audience is going to be used to. That's because this isn't a sci-fi action movie. There's actually like very little action in this movie.
Yeah.
And I can see that being a critique of this movie. I personally don't agree with it, but I can see that being a thing. So I want to get that as a word of caution. A lot of this movie is people talking to each other. Dune is a religious epic.
It's about the slow burn.
Yes.
It's really about the slow burn.
And it's so well worth it. It's a story that when I first read it, I was just enamored. I was like, wow, this is truly... I always thought Dune, oh man, that's going to be like overhyped. It's got to be. And I watched the movie and I was like, oh, that was good. So let me read the book, and I read the book, and I was like, "Oh man, that's a story."
This is crazy.
So like, I read Dune Messiah, and Dune Messiah. Oh man, this movie is gonna get the trilogy is gonna be finished. We know that. I mean, Messiah is my favorite book of the series. I mean, I've only read the first 3, like I said, but Messiah is such a strong conclusion to the Atreides saga or the Paul Atreides saga. That like, man, it's something to behold, and I cannot wait to see that brought to screen.
I'd be remiss if we didn't talk about Paul Atreides as a character.
Yes.
Because there's something to say about a hero arc, and then there's something else to say about a hero arc that involves not only this much like gravity and seriousness, but like character development that you can see on screen.
Yes.
It's his character's beauty is the way that he bears that burden.
Yes.
And the way he develops in this movie is some really amazing character development. And there's a particular poignant scene. Nate knows what I'm talking about, but he just walks into the room and everything that he says is like, oh my god.
Mic drop, mic
oh my
drop,
yeah,
drop.
He's not even mic dropping, he's throwing mics on the floor. He's throwing mics on the floor.
And like we said, man, Timothée Chalamet is putting his all into his performance.
I bring up his character because I want to say this is his best movie. And I don't care what anybody says. I don't care what
fantastic.
Anybody says. Dune 2 is Timothée Chalamet's best movie.
Paul Atreides is such a hard character to perform too, because I mean, Paul isn't a character of many words.
No.
Paul isn't, and he's not like a Luke Skywalker. He's not even like a villain.
No.
He's a bad guy.
And he knows
like
that.
He's a bad guy and he knows that.
Yeah.
And like, man, it's a hard role to perform, and I gotta give props to Timothée Chalamet. Like he's really taken the character of Paul, and really like when I think of the character now, I'm gonna see Timothée Chalamet.
Yeah.
Every character is ripped straight from the book, and Paul, was like a tall order. That was like, okay, he was good in the first movie, but the events of Dune Part 2, that's going to be the real tester.
Mm-hmm.
And he passed the test with flying colors. And really, Messiah is going to be the test of Paul Atreides and whether Timothée Chalamet is Paul. And I think if this movie is any indication of...
He's going to get an Oscar. Mark my words on the Some Like It YouTube. If they do Messiah, Timothée Chalamet is getting an Oscar, a Golden Globe, a SAG Award. He's getting something. He's getting something. He's getting something.
I'm not a betting man, so I'm not going to toss anything in there. But I can't say that I disagree. I mean, he was great.
Dude, I mostly, for my personal preference, I rate movies based off of their rewatchability. Because that's really when I sink my teeth into a movie. So, for this movie in particular, it's a movie, in my eyes, that has pretty much no flaws.
Yeah.
I could rewatch this movie infinitely and see something different with the cinematography every time I see it, or the lighting, or the silhouetting, or even if the CGI was spot. You couldn't have convinced me like some of this. You could have convinced me some of the shit was real, but yeah, I'm gonna have to go 4 out of 5.
4 out of 5. Dune Part 2 is a masterclass in making a sci-fi story, and just everything that goes into this movie is just like it's the right ingredient. Denis Villeneuve put the right amount of sauce. Put the right amount of salt, pepper, all that stuff into this movie. He cooked like really hard, and I'm struggling to think of what score I would give this movie because on one hand, I don't give out perfect scores often.
No,
I don't give those out like just willy nilly.
No,
but I'm struggling to think of why I shouldn't give this movie a perfect score. And so because of that, Dune Part 2 is, and I gave the first movie an 8.5 out of 10. This movie's going to get a 10 out of 10.
Oh.
And that's a rare occasion. You're not going to see a lot of that.
No.
If Denis wants to do the whole saga, and I know he's just saying, I just want to do the Paul Atreides saga. If he wants to do all 6 books, all 6 Frank Herbert books, we don't talk about the other ones. But if he wants to do the rest of them, I have no opposition. Like, there's like, I'm never going to speak up against it because just, we're only 2 movies in. This only covers the first book, and yet... It's amazing, and I wouldn't have wanted any other director to have tackled this. It's a hard project, and I really got to give Denis props for delivering on every single promise he's made about this movie. But I think that this movie is really going to cement Dune in the pop culture zeitgeist.
Yeah, right. I think it will too.
Dune it's already an influential work, but now that there's a movie out and a good one at that, like 2 good movies at that. People are going to be talking about Dune the same way we talk about Lord of the Rings.
Yeah. I feel like I have a hangover.
Yeah.
I don't even know what to say.
There's so much to discuss.
But hey, that wraps it up.
Yeah, did you see Dune 2? Did you like it? I think a little more than some are going to like it.
Yeah, I was about to say, more than some like this.
Thank you, guys. See you in the next one. Adios.